What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, January 31st, 2019, last day of the month here. Thank goodness it's Thursday. Or actually, it's sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. And of course, only 2 weeks to go until Valentine's Day. So if you have a significant other, start laying your plans now. So that you don't miss that. We have a lot to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Sam is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, and opinions. And let's get right on into it. Let's start with Venezuela, because obviously that is the number one flashpoint that's going on right now. And apparently, Venezuela's self-proclaimed interim president Juan Guaido, I guess is how it's pronounced, apparently has been holding secret talks with members of Venezuela's military. He's trying to basically get them to desert Maduro and come over onto his side, and obviously that's going to be a major factor. Whoever has the military on their side is going to prevail in this situation. So far, the military seem to be indicating that they're standing with Maduro, but apparently Guaido is offering them amnesty in exchange for abandoning President Maduro. Now, I'm not sure what he's offering them amnesty from, because they haven't done anything yet. So we'll see what's going to happen over there. I imagine there's probably some very generous offers being made to some of those commanders out here. Maduro called on the people of the United States, that's us, to deter the Trump administration from putting boots on the ground in Venezuela, warning that any intervention would backfire, leading to a new Vietnam-like disaster. And he's absolutely accurate in portraying it that way, because the United States does very well in open desert warfare. They've never really done very well in jungles, as we learned in Vietnam here. But I don't think there's going to be a full-on U.S. invasion of Venezuela. I think the U.S. is going to do what they did in Syria. They're going to try and find the disaffected military deserters. They're going to give them guns and weapons and say, you go get Maduro for us. And because a full-on invasion is going to inflame the entire region. You've got the reality that you're having to deal with Russia, which is in there with their own interests. But it almost does seem like inflaming the region may be on the agenda, because John Bolton is out there. Now he's talking about 3 Caribbean, South American governments, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba. He's calling them the troika of evil. And talking about going after all of them at the same time, which that didn't work out too well at the Bay of Pigs. And let's be very honest here, okay? We're not winning in Afghanistan. We're certainly not winning in Syria to be taking on 1, let alone 3 additional new wars is not a good idea at this time. I would definitely not advise against it. Over in the Independent Great Britain, they're reporting that Maduro has accused Donald Trump of hiring the Colombian mafia to assassinate him. And he's saying Donald Trump has without doubt given an order to kill me and has told the government of Colombia and the Colombian mafia to kill me. And critics argue that Maduro's claim is a red herring tactic to rally up support in Venezuela amid mass protest against his socialist government and the debilitating inflation and food and medicine shortages in the Latin American country. Well, maybe, maybe not. Like I said, I think the plan for Venezuela is not a full-on outright military intervention, but something covert using a proxy. Because it will turn into another Vietnam. If we go on in there into that jungle, it will be another Vietnam. Meanwhile, Moscow is out there saying they will do whatever it takes, in quote marks, whatever it takes to defend its interests in Venezuela. Now, Moscow has said that U.S. sanctions against Venezuela's state-run oil company are illegal. They're enforcing unfair competition. and a Kremlin spokesman has reiterated that Russia is prepared to use all mechanisms available to defend its economic interests in Venezuela, interests that are closely tied to the Maduro government. And I think we ought to be taking them seriously. Now, according to Russia Today, Russia has extended billions of dollars of loans to PDVSA, that's the state-run oil company, and mostly via oil firm Rosneft. The company has extended $6 billion of loans, which must be repaid in crude oil by the end of the year. And data from Standard & Poor's Global Platts shows that as of November 2018, Venezuela had a $3.1 billion outstanding loan to repay to Rosneft. Rosneft also has 5 joint upstream projects with PDVSA in Venezuela. So Russia's down there. They're saying, leave us alone. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And again, Russia's Lavrov is saying these U.S. sanctions imposed by the United States on Venezuela's oil company are illegal under international law. Lavrov said the sanctions amounted to an attempt by the United States basically to confiscate Venezuelan state assets. All righty. Over in the European Union, their parliament is urging member states to recognize Guaido as Venezuela's interim president. They're all just dogpiling on here. And again, I want to get back to a simple reality here. It is up to the Venezuelan people to decide who's going to be their president. It really isn't any business of any other country to go on in there and do that, even though the U.S. is in a bad habit of regime changing all over the place. The Venezuelan people elected Maduro in an election that was described by international observers as clearly transparent and honest. Former President Jimmy Carter said that Venezuela has one of the most honest and transparent election systems in the world, better even than what we have here in the United States. Anyway, the members of the European Parliament pledged full support for Venezuela's opposition-controlled parliament, the National Assembly, urging the EU states to accredit the envoys appointed by the opposition, and the resolution was adopted 439 votes to 104, with 88 members of the European Parliament abstaining. So they're all just piling on in there. Now, Spain, France, Germany, the Netherlands, and Great Britain have demanded to recognize Venezuela's opposition leader Juan Guaido as the head of the crisis-torn country if the new elections are not announced in Venezuela until the end of this week. And of course, Maduro is saying, no, we just had elections. I won. And the EU is expressing its support for dialogue between the Venezuelan parties, has suggested an international contact group be set up in order to settle the crisis in the Latin American country. Well, the crisis is of the United States and the West's making. And by the way, on this last election, the United Nations wanted to send observers. It was the opposition group that didn't want them to show up. Just keep that in mind here. Britain is calling for EU sanctions on Maduro. And again, the article is just loaded up with all these negative words. Maduro's government is a bunch of kleptocrats. They've enriched themselves on the back of the rest of the population, which sounds a lot like what we have here in the United States of America. Now, there's an organization called the Lima Group. It was set up in 2017 to try and find a peaceful solution to the crisis in Venezuela. They are opposed to Maduro. They're taking sides with Juan Guaido, but they are out there saying that they oppose military intervention in Venezuela, probably because of the realization it could trigger war across the entire continent. So they're out there in opposition to military conflict here. CNN, fresh from its wonderfully prescient view of the arrest of Roger Stone, is once again out there selling the propaganda. They're trying to manufacture consent for the coup attempt in Venezuela. And I don't think the American people are too happy about it. We've really had our fill of war here. But CNN had this so-called exclusive report from inside Venezuela. It aired multiple times on the network on January 28th. It's a good example of how influential media outlets in the U.S. effectively create propaganda for the opposition, which, by the way, is now receiving funds from President Donald Trump's administration. For the 4-minute report, CNN correspondent Nick Patton-Welsh went undercover, at least that's what they're calling it, in order to capture the desperation gripping the nation. And they basically went on to demonstrate hyperinflation at grocery stores, Venezuelans lined up in lines for fuel and food, especially in Caracas, and opposition demonstrations on January 23rd. Now, interestingly enough, first of all, it wasn't socialism that destroyed Venezuela's economy. Socialism originally, under the Bolivarian Revolution, it was working. But Venezuela has been the target of U.S. economic war for decades. And that's the reason conditions are so bad in Venezuela. They're literally trying to starve them to death. And as far as the demonstrations, there are demonstrations supportive of Maduro, but you're never going to see those on corporate media. No, Maduro's bad, Assad is bad, and the Afghanis are bad, and Putin's bad, and we've got to send you to get them for us here. All right, over in Syria, Director of U.S. National Intelligence Dan Coates is saying that Iran will quite likely retaliate against Israel's continuing air raids on Syria. Now, Israel is, as you know, constantly launching attacks inside Syria, claiming to hit Iranian targets there. Now, Iran has been offering advisory military assistance to the Syrian government in its counterterrorism battle against the U.S.-backed factions. There are no Iranian boots on the ground. I'm sure there's material support as well. Now, the last time Israel attacked Syria, they bombed Syrian military assets. So, again, getting on back to U.S. Director of National Intelligence Dan Coates, he, in testimony before the Senate Intelligence Committee, said he believes Iran wants to avoid a major armed conflict with Israel, but that continued Israeli attacks on targets in Syria may spark the Iranian retaliation and in turn lead to a regional war. Yeah, it does seem to be heading that way. Another article on the same subject. This one's out of lowblog.com. War against Iran becoming ever more likely. And look at all the people who are pushing for it. John Bolton, Bibi Netanyahu. They've been lusting after war in Iran for a very, very long time. They've been trying to justify it, saying Iran is building nuclear weapons. Israel's been screaming that Iran is just weeks away from a nuclear weapon. They've been saying that for 30 years, and it hasn't happened. And by the way, the IAEA and U.S. intelligence agencies are still saying that Iran is not making any moves that would indicate a desire to produce nuclear weapons. They're still in full compliance with the P5+1 agreement. But the people who want war, they want their war. And it looks like there's a lot of pressure that's being brought to bear on Trump to go ahead and start the war in Iran. Now, here's something to think about. We're already mired in wars in Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, Yemen by proxy, 7 officially declared wars. Well, they're not officially declared. Congress has never declared war. 7 officially acknowledged wars, and we've got military in 40% of the world's countries. So now John Bolton is talking about going to Afghanistan, Nicaragua, and Cuba, and now they're talking about Iran. We just don't have the military to do it. We don't have the personnel unless they bring back the draft, and that is going to provoke outrage among the American people. So I think what's going to happen is the House Democrats are going to launch a whole bunch of investigations into Trump and just keep piling the pressure on until he caves in and goes along with the war agenda. Meanwhile, in eastern Syria, U.S. airstrikes killed 8 civilians from the same family, and they were attacking Baghouz, which is the so-called last village of ISIS, and they killed at least 8 civilians, all from the same family, including 3 women and 5 children. Now, heavy U.S. airstrikes against populated civilian areas have been a recurring source of civilian deaths in this last ISIS enclave in Syria. And of course, the U.S. government called it, well, it's collateral damage. You know, we're sorry. You know, they just got in the way, but at least we're getting the bad guys here. This is very interesting. A U.S. court has ordered the Syrian government to pay the family of journalist Marie Colvin $302 million after the judge found Damascus responsible for her death. And apparently the judgment is claiming the Syrian military and their intelligence apparatus targeted the broadcasts of Colvin and other journalists during the siege of Homs, and that Marie was killed during the shelling of the Bab Amr Media Center in Homs on February 22nd, 2012. Well, it's good for demonizing Syria, but U.S. courts don't really have jurisdiction over there. And so I don't think Syria is going to be writing any checks anytime soon here. Meanwhile, Moscow, the foreign ministry, is expressing their concern that the White Helmets have not abandoned their attempt to stage more false flag chemical attacks against civilians, Syrian civilians, in order to blame on Assad, which would allow the United States to go on in either with cruise missile attacks or more boots on the ground and say, see, we have to say that evil Assad, he's gassing his own people. And again, why would Assad do something like that? We know why ISIS would. They're trying to get the war going. Assad doesn't have a reason to use chemical weapons against Syrian civilians. He knows it will justify a U.S. intervention. He doesn't need to use the chemical weapons. He's pretty much won the war. It doesn't make any sense at all. And have you ever stopped to ask yourself, if Assad was going to use chemical weapons, why didn't he use them on the terrorists? Why is it always civilians? Why is it always kids? Why? To magnify the shock value. Oh my goodness, Assad is gassing women and children. Well, no, the White Helmets are, and they're gassing women and children so that you will be shocked and say, oh my goodness, what a terrible thing. And you will disconnect your cerebral cortex and not really think about, does the story make sense? So anyway, Maria Zakharova was at a briefing saying that according to available information, a group of activists, the White Helmet, have prepared the necessary equipment in several hospitals of Idlib to film such provocations. So it looks like we're going to get another false flag chemical attack. Anyway, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov was at a meeting with representatives of 5 major nuclear powers: China, France, Russia, the United Kingdom, and the United States, aka the Nuclear Five, and says the level of potential conflict in the world has reached a dangerous point, and boy, does he have that one right. One reckless mistake, one bad piece of computer code, and the shooting is going to start. And again, that's an aspect to our current situation we didn't have to deal with in World War I and World War II. I mean, mistakes were made. You know, people fired guns they ought not to. But now we have all these automated weapons. And if there's a software error, if there's a programming error, these automated weapons could start a war before any humans could possibly intervene. That's what happened when the USS Vincennes shot down that Iranian passenger jet liner. That was a software error. Same thing with the accidental shoot down of TWA 800. Software error. It's a new aspect to war that we have to keep an eye on. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And if you would like to help out Republic Broadcasting, and they do need it, there's no way to put this politely, Republic Broadcasting needs you. The postal address to send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity, cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other time. The network thanks you. Okay, getting on over to Israel. As you know, there's been a big stink over Airbnb deciding to no longer list rental properties in the occupied territories of the West Bank. And it's become a big, ugly issue with Israel screaming, oh, you're a bunch of anti-Semites, you're a bunch of Jew haters. But Amnesty International has now waded in on the issue. And it's basically, they're calling for all online travel sites to ban listings from the Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank. And basically said that Airbnb, Booking.com, Expedia, TripAdvisor are promoting tourism in Israeli settlements within the Palestinian-occupied West Bank that most of the world considers to be illegal. And this influx of tourism dollars is allowing the settlers to build more on stolen Palestinian land. So Israel has already responded by banning Amnesty International. You know, how dare you say that tourism companies are profiting from Israel's war crimes in the occupied West Bank, which is exactly what's going on here. So, and again, an usual anti-Semitic boycott and delegitimization campaign, blah, 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 blah. And Israel comes on out and says, you know, are you saying we don't have a right to exist? And nobody's saying that. It's the way Israel exists that is worthy of criticism. It's not about their religion. It's not about their ethnicity. It is their behavior, specifically the behavior of Israel's government. And we have a right under the First Amendment to protest, to denounce that behavior. Apparently in the northern plains of the occupied West Bank, a group of illegal Israeli colonist settlers attacked a group of Palestinian shepherds, throwing rocks at the shepherds and at the flocks. And apparently the Israeli assailants came from the illegal Rotem colony, which was built on Palestinian land. So they're still out there behaving like they do here. The United Nations yesterday has urged Israeli occupation authorities to end what they describe as interference in Palestinian children's education in the occupied Palestinian territory. Now, this has been the result of several incidents that have occurred where the Israeli forces will simply raid a school and they don't arrest anybody. They just go on in and cause a lot of noise. They traumatize the kids. They disrupt the educational process. And apparently, last year alone, there were 111 documented cases of interference to education in the West Bank, affecting more than 19,000 children. And so the UN basically came on out and said that the children have to be better protected from the effects of the Israeli occupation. Unfortunately, that's not likely to happen. Israel doesn't listen to the United Nations. They hold themselves as being above the law. Now, there's been an interesting little development having to do with that Senate Bill 1. This was the bill sponsored by Marco Rubio and AIPAC that, first of all, handed a lot of money to Israel and voted to basically criminalize the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement, to criminalize criticism of Israel. Surprisingly, a lot of Democrats are saying they're going to vote against this bill because it will strengthen the peaceful boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. And they're absolutely right. People are going to start paying attention, saying, you know, what's going on, that they felt they had to pass a law here, the banned in Boston effect. The other reason I think they're voting against it is they dread a Supreme Court challenge that would establish firmly that we have a First Amendment right to criticize the actions of the government of Israel. And right now I think they want to leave it as on kind of a vague footing, where they can scream, you're an anti-Semite and you're a Jew hater, and get you to shut up. Overall, though, especially here in the United States, support for Israel's behavior seems to be on the wane. Israel still has a lot of support from European Jews, but American Jews are starting to pull back, and they're starting to realize Israel's actions are actually making the world a more dangerous place for all the world's Jewish people. So that one may go down to defeat. Okay, we're going to take another break here for commercials. We've got a caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go to the phones here. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I want to respond to that gentleman in New York that called about the woman he watched on the news or whatever from supposedly either Venezuela or outside Venezuela. But you know, Lenny's right. You gotta do your research. I know. I mean, you can go to The Last Vagabond. You go to What Really Happened about Tom. You can go to RT on YouTube, RT America. Look up that news with Rick Sanchez. He had an interview with Max Blumenthal. Max Blumenthal wrote that article with Dan Cohen, and it's at the Gray Zone about how this guy was groomed, Guaido.
Yeah.
Outside of Venezuela, in like Belfast or something. And a group of people. And this guy, Mike Guaido, there is opposition in every country of the world, you know?
Yes.
There's always opposition party. But this guy was because Venezuela's got a lot of opposition parties, but he was a part of a small group of, like, they're extremists. Like, I don't know if you know that, but they actually would cordon off neighborhoods and indoctrinate people and get them to go out and cause the violence against, like, the police, you know, and there was reports where they would string up these metal lines across the road, and, you know, a lot of people ride motorcycles in Venezuela, and
yes,
people would ride through the metal line and they cut somebody's head off, like decapitate. I mean, this guy is no good, and that's why he's perfect for what Washington and Britain. If you notice, Mike, how they're all lined up, the same countries, the same ones that are either puppets or they're all part of that. They're going to get the oil, you know.
Yes.
Britain's going to get the oil. You know what's it's. I get so angry, like Lenny did, because Mike, look at all the people that go along with it. Not only the leaders of the country, but the media in all the countries, BBC, and it makes you sick on how all these people just do it. It's not even. I mean, I don't know. Would it be part ideology? It's just about money.
It's about the money. It's about the money. I mean, you know, the United States has been wanting to get into Venezuela. First of all, they oppose the Bolivarian socialism, where the wealth of the nation is spent on the nation's people. That sets a bad example for, you know, the serfs in every other country who are supposed to live lives of borderline poverty while the elites get insanely rich.
That's their choice, you know. Like, if they vote for a socialist or a communist, that's not for you or me, you know, to decide. It's their country, and that's who they voted for, you know. And this has nothing to do with that because, you know, what your listener from New York, you know, have we learned our lesson from Iraq, the lie, Ukraine, Operation Ajax in the 50s, and Iran, right? It's just on and on and on. It's the same playbook. So you can't turn around and say, well, maybe this time is different. You know, maybe what they're saying is true. Nothing what your government tells you is true anymore. And the media. You got to do your own research, you know. And Mike, remember that woman, Maria Conchita Gonzalez? She was like on Running Man, that movie. Remember? She used to be a hard line against, like, Chavez, remember? I wonder where she's at now, because I haven't heard a peep from her. She was all against those because she's part of that extremist element that, you know, I mean, it's just amazing. I haven't heard from anybody from Hollywood yet out on this, have you?
No, I haven't really, but then I don't pay much attention to people in Hollywood anymore ever since, you know, I got blacklisted. But I imagine there'll be some opinions voiced on that. But right now, the corporate media, they're trying to manufacture the consent. They're trying to sell us yet another war. And if you get called by a pollster and just say, no, we've had too many wars already. We're war weary. It's time to knock it off and find another way for this country to do business.
And then you had a caller from Maine about the wall. Trump could have started building the wall. He could have used the money from the budget. He had all these opportunities. Like I said, he put all these wrong people in, and he had opportunity to start doing some of the, and he kept dragging his feet, and then you got to wait till February 15th, and then you might, if nothing happens after that, he's finished.
I agree.
He's finished.
I absolutely agree.
All right, Mike, have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Yeah, it's time for Trump to put up or shut up. And, all righty, let's go back to the phones here to George in Texas. Aloha, George. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike? The thing is, with these states passing these late-term abortions, everybody's panicking. But guess what? I have a feeling a lot of doctors are going to refuse to do it.
I'm already hearing that. I'm already hearing that from nurses, delivery nurses, saying that they're not going to do that.
And here's also the thing too. I can see the governor saying your medical license and you're going to be arrested if you refuse. And I would tell you one thing, that'd be a nice Supreme Court battle.
Yeah, I think this one is going to wind up at the Supreme Court. I mean, it's one thing to talk about terminating a baby in the first trimester. Second trimester, you're really pushing it. But now for New York and Virginia to have literally said they can kill the baby after it's born. I mean, that is utterly ridiculous. And Virginia's governor was actually on the radio, actually on video. There's a videotape of it, basically saying the baby can be born and then the mother and the doctor will decide what they want to do. I'm sorry, that's called infanticide. It's called murder.
Well, you know what? Like I say, I hope the doctors refuse. Let them get arrested, because I'll tell you one thing, there'll be a lot of us standing behind the doctors because... And the thing is, this is why when there's voter fraud going on and that the Democrats are doing, don't let them get away with it. Don't let them do it and stand by and watch them. Get in there and stop it, because look what happens, Mike.
Yep.
When you got election fraud, voter fraud. And the thing is, I'm even like in Texas where election seats were stolen. I'm like saying there's no statute of limitations on fraud. That includes voter fraud.
Well, unfortunately, you're wrong on that one. At least here in the state of Hawaii, there's something like just a few weeks window to file a challenge to an election. And after that, basically, it's over and done with. It's certified, and that's the end of it. But it is very alarming that they're pushing this agenda here. I mean, what's it going to be next? Abortion will be legal out to 1 year old, 2 years old? I mean, that's really getting sick.
And and another thing is too is like with these gun confiscation laws. I just realized even like some law enforcement in Texas talk about these red flag laws. They say when it starts kicking in, they say you're going to see the attrition rate go up among police officers because there's no due process with these red flag laws.
No, there isn't.
No way to verify. There's no due process.
No, it's just somebody says, I think this person is dangerous, and they get disarmed, and they have to spend thousands of dollars to get their guns back. I'm really glad that up in Washington State, the sheriffs there are refusing to enforce those new gun laws. We're starting to see this pushback against this Democratic agenda of everybody totally disarmed and, abortion on demand up to the moment of birth. That one really ought to wake people up.
Because I have a feeling the Democrats are really pushing for national suicide of their party for what they're pushing. The Democrats in Colorado voting for the end of the Electoral College? I don't think so.
That would take a constitutional amendment. They'll never get it through.
Yeah. But anyway, Mike, thank you. I'll let you get back to the show.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Joe in California. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I got a question on... Hi, Mike. I got a question on the BDS vis-a-vis Israel, but if there's a station break, I hope you can hold me over. First, I wanted to ask you, regarding Bernie Sanders. I know you said you would vote for Bernie Sanders. You would have voted for him in 2016 if he got the nomination. What's Bernie Sanders' position on the borders? Is he an open borders guy? Because I have a feeling he is.
I don't think he's taken a position on that. At least not one that I've heard. Obviously, before I would vote for him, I would, have to take a much closer look at him and his policies. The problem is that during the campaign, everybody is lying. They're telling you what you want to hear to get your votes. I mean, Obama campaigned in 2008 on ending the wars. The wars continued.
Yeah.
Trump campaigned in 2016 on ending the wars. The wars are continuing, and now it looks like we're going to go into Venezuela. So at this point, it's really impossible to know what a politician is really going to do once they win office, because they seem to view it as their divine right to lie to the voters to get elected.
Sure. I wanted to go on just a quick point on Venezuela. Excellent calls yesterday from Lenny in California and Peter. Peter gave a great analysis on if there's a military, if the U.S. sends forces there or even supports a guerrilla force. Unlike Korea and Vietnam, there's not a superpower or a large power like China on the border. So I don't think it would be very difficult for them to overthrow that government in Caracas. But one thing about these elites in Latin America, I mean, they're all over the world. They do the bidding of the U.S., but this Latin elite is really despicable. They're more at home in Miami, in New York, in L.A. They have contempt for their compatriots, especially this Venezuelan elite because of the oil.
Yes.
But vis-a-vis the oil, it's not about control of the oil, Mike, in the sense that the U.S. wants to consume the oil because we have enough oil domestically.
Yes.
There's a Russian angle in this. They want control of the oil so they can increase production and weaken Russia and weaken OPEC plus Russia, because you increase production in Venezuela that has the highest proven reserves in the world. You're gonna just that price of oil is just going to is going to drop precipitously, and Russia is going to be weakened as a result.
Well, so will our big oil corporations as well, and that's why they're going to oppose it. But it isn't just pumping out the oil and selling it; it's making sure that it sells only for the U.S. dollar to bring back the petrodollar. That's the real prize here.
That's a true point. Lastly, on the BDS question, a lot of times I go to the markets and you have that Sabra Hummus, which is an Israeli company, or Turkish products like Turkish apricots, Turkish pomegranate juice, and I'll get into conversations with consumers and say you shouldn't buy these products. They most of the time, most cases they don't know who's behind these products, but I'll tell them, Sabra, you're supporting Israeli occupation, or in the case of Turkey, you're supporting a government that has imprisoned more journalists than any other government in the world, or has banned more political parties than any other government in the world. So I'm just curious, if this BDS law passes, would I be in violation of that law? Could they just put me in jail for educating fellow shoppers?
Well, that's the goal of all of these laws, and 26 states have already passed laws criminalizing BDS. Now, it doesn't involve jail time, but there's definitely some stiff fines out there. Somebody needs to get this to the Supreme Court and establish that there is a First Amendment still at large in this country.
Absolutely. I don't know what's gotten into these. I mean, I know they're controlled and owned by the Israeli lobby, but taking it to this extent, this extreme where you're basically infringing on my First Amendment rights.
Well, I would stand on Marburg versus Madison. An anti-BDS law is automatically null and void because it is unconstitutional.
Absolutely, but I don't have much.
Up to the Supreme Court.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Joe in Tennessee. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Anyway, hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
Calls on the CIA to stage an intervention with Trump. I mean, did they stage an intervention with JFK, too? I mean, what's Schumer asking for? I mean, he's the same senator who said, when Trump first got in, there was 6 ways from Sunday for the intelligence agencies to get even with you,
Yes.
This guy's a real creep. And, I hear a lot of criticism of Trump and everything, but this is a prime example of what he's up against. I mean, here's the Senate Minority Leader making veiled threats at the President of the United States, knowing that there's a deep war in Venezuela. And if he does, I'll never call in to support him again, because he's, so far he's kept us out of these neocon rhino wars. But in Venezuela, I don't think so. I think he's just going to work to try to put, that other guy in and get rid of the socialists down there. But I'm hoping. I mean, if it becomes a hot war, it's insanity. And I don't think I think he's doing probably what he did with North Korea. He's rattling the sabers to make a deal. I mean, the guy is a deal maker. The other thing I think about is this idea, like I heard Dustin talking about, like Trump getting blamed if they don't build the wall. Well, I don't know. I'm a fair-minded person, and I think that Trump's doing pretty much everything possible to try to build that wall. I mean, he had Ron, but she'd cave after 2 weeks. So he's got his own party against him. So I don't know. I don't know how much blame people can give him. I mean, every time I see him on TV, he's talking about the wall, how important it is, and how he's going to get funds from here or there. I mean, he's not a dictator. He is the president. He's got to work with the legislature, and I think he's putting up a fight, and he hasn't really given up yet.
Well, again, it's going to come down to, is the wall going to get built? And meanwhile, every day that goes by that it isn't built, more illegal immigrants are pouring into our country. They're costing our economy, tens of billions of dollars. I mean, the illegal immigrants in this country are costing this nation far more than the money that it would take to build that wall. But the Democrats want them because they're going to vote. I mean, you saw that report out of Texas. Something like almost 60,000 people who were ineligible to vote were registered to vote, and they think about 40,000 of them voted in the last election. I mean, that's a major problem, and the Democrats absolutely love that. Anyway, listen, Joe, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We're going to be back with another phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we go back to the phones here, somebody just emailed me an article from January of last year where apparently a University of Tennessee student was arguing that 2-year-old children could be aborted. They have no right to life, so this guy says, because they cannot communicate. And therefore, we don't know that they're sentient or self-aware. So I was kind of joking when I said, what's next? 1-year-old, 2-year-old. But this student, pro-abortion, can't communicate. They don't have a right to life. And then UT students signed a petition saying that it should be right to abort newborn babies up to 5 years old. I mean, that is just absolutely nonsense. All right, let's go back to the phones. Art off the grid, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's in your mind?
Holy crap. Seriously?
Seriously.
I would argue, dudette, whatever, you don't have a right to live, okay? How about I come cut your freaking head off and we'll see just exactly where your right to life is, okay? Anyway, 3 points. The first one, the previous caller, Donald Trump could have done the wall and several other things if he actually knew the authority that he has as president and exercised that authority. 2, as far as Venezuela goes, I'm kind of wondering, kind of curious, maybe if we may not be looking at another, remember when George Bush went into Panama after Noriega?
Yes.
Kind of thing?
Yes.
I'm kind of wondering if that might be what we're looking at there. And I suddenly forgot what that third thing was.
Well, when...
I guess maybe I was so taken aback by the dude talking about 2-year-olds can't communicate. I guess I was just so taken aback by that. The third one just kind of lost me. I can't believe people actually think this way. Oh, yeah, I know what it was. Virginia. Did you hear about Virginia? I want to kind of get your thoughts on this. Did you hear about, I believe it was Virginia, one of their state legislators tried to come up with something similar to New York's new abortion law.
Yeah.
And this one so-called colleague of hers in the Virginia legislature signed on as a co-sponsor, and now she is backpedaling like crazy with comments like, well, I guess maybe I should have actually read it before I signed on.
Yeah.
Mike, where have we heard this before?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We have to pass it to know what's in it. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people are reacting very negatively to this. And again, the pro-abortion people, the Planned Parenthood people, they really have convinced themselves that babies, even at the moment of birth, are just bundles of cells, and they don't have a right to life, and it's basically okay to kill them if that's what the mother wants.
Yep. It's an insane world, folks. Have a good one, man.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open again here. Okay. Apparently, we got to take a break for station identification, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Bloomberg released details of a Pentagon report scheduled to be released this week, which has led to the acting U.S. Defense Secretary calling into question the performance of the F-35. And apparently this report is going to be a barn burner. Among the other findings of this report is they're saying that the estimated service life of the aircraft may be as low as 2,100 flying hours versus the expected of 8,000. Means it's going to wear out a lot more quickly. They're having problems with reliability, field maintenance metrics. They're not being met. Current fleet performance is well below the benchmark. And unfortunately, there's another report coming on out regarding the USS Gerald Ford. And apparently it is also equally critical, saying that the carrier's launching recovery systems are of poor and unknown reliability, and that it's not going to be able to maintain the required sortie generation rate. Now, what that means is how many aircraft can it launch and recover in a 12-hour day? And it was designed to do 160 sorties per 12-hour fly day with a surge capacity of 270 sorties per 24-hour fly day. It's not getting there. It's not getting there at all. And again, this ship was supposed to be ready to go in 2015. And they're still working the bugs out of it. There are reliability questions, maintenance issues. And I cannot stress the folly of engaging in so many military conflicts around the world when we can no longer produce cost-effective weapons, which the F-35 and the Gerald Ford prove. They're both boondoggles. Huge, vast sums of money. $13 billion in the case of the Gerald Ford, $1 trillion in development on the F-35. And they're not very good. All right, let's take a phone call from Steve Elkins. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, just to add what Art was talking about, it's insane. This whole abortion thing up in New York, it violates the Hippocratic Oath, my oath, in that I will do no harm. First of all, and I really don't believe. I believe a lot of nurses and physicians will not participate in this. I just can't see it. It violates the Hippocratic Oath. Which is interesting is that they're pushing this new legislation, and at the same time, I think I sent you over something about allowing a child of 12 years or older to have their medical records pretty much sealed, and that they can access them, but your parent can't. It's interesting going back and forth to no rights, and now you have rights. It's very odd. It's very odd.
It is. It's just absolutely disgusting, and it's. First of all, the abortion issue itself is very complicated, and I mean, here they're basically saying to a woman that she can carry the baby for 9 months and at the last minute change her mind. Just throw it in the trash. That's what they're saying.
It's mind-boggling. Even it's mind-boggling, Mike. And like I said, I don't think anybody. I can't see a nurse following that. I wouldn't do it. I would never sign on a case. I'd walk away, and I hope there are a lot of professionals just like myself who say no, this won't happen.
Whatever happened to the idea of giving up the baby for adoption?
I agree. Totally agree.
Yeah.
That's a great option, but for some reason they just went right over the top of that one. I have no clue. Like I said, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I pray, I hope healthcare professionals will walk away from this and say no. I will not be a part of this.
Well,
and
I know that Planned Parenthood, they're going to be excited to have larger baby parts to sell.
It's insane. Hey, thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Now, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is warning that the United States' decision to produce low-yield nuclear warheads is only going to make a nuclear war more likely. Now, as you know, the United States has pulled out of the INF, the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, claiming that Russia was in violation of it. Russia's saying, no, come and take a look. Our missiles are all compliant. And then basically the United States has sent the message, no, they're not going to go back to the INF, and they're going to start producing low-yield nuclear warheads, basically a swap-in replacement for the warheads currently used on the Trident missiles. And they're going to be low yield. And Sergei Lavrov's situation is he's saying that if you have a small nuclear bomb, you are in fact more likely to actually go ahead and use it. Now, nobody wants to use the big giant city busters, but a warhead the size of, well, say 15 kilotons, about the size of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, he's right. It's more likely that especially if the wars turn against the United States, they're going to start using those weapons. I think it was Paul Craig Roberts was saying that there's actually been talk inside Washington, D.C. of a preemptive strike against Russia. All right, we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. We have a new insight on President Donald Trump. I've been wondering if he was getting bad advice from his advisors, and I think he is, but it also turns out he may not be listening. He may just be convinced he knows what's going on. And apparently Trump got into a little bit of a tiff with his intelligence chiefs yesterday and basically lectured them for what he described as naive assessments on Iran, because the intelligence chiefs sharply contradicted his foreign policy claims, particularly on North Korea and ISIS. And so the president's response was this dressing down of America's top intelligence officials. He called them passive and naive, that they were flat out wrong in Iran, suggesting they go back to school. So there's another problem with the Trump White House. It's not just that he's getting bad information from people like John Bolton. He's not listening to the people who are trying to tell him the real deal. And again, both the IAEA and the intelligence agencies are saying Iran is not trying to build a nuclear bomb. They're not going through any of the activities that would indicate a plan to build nuclear weapons. Okay. Senator James Inhofe of Oklahoma, who recently took over as chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, has warned during a hearing about the challenges posed by China and Russia that people need to better understand the threats both countries pose to the international world order that America helped create. This is coming out of the Military Times. So basically, Inhofe is out there saying that the United States is responsible for the condition of the world as it is, and Russia and China are a threat to that Pax Americana. And we're heading into World War III, which he certainly got that one right. Okay, let's talk about some domestic politics here. Lindsey Graham has asked the FBI to explain why they had to arrest Roger Stone in this pre-dawn raid with guns drawn, night vision scopes, full body armor. And he also wants to know, how is it that CNN knew to be there with cameras? And Graham is saying he's concerned about the number of agents involved, the tactics employed, and the timing of the arrest. And by the way, Roger Stone's wife was dragged out of the house barefoot in her nightgown. So I hope Graham gets an answer on that. But to me, it was theater. It was just pure theater. Robert Mueller wanted to make the arrest look like it was spectacular and newsworthy. And that's why they called this reporter at CNN, who previously was associated with the FBI, and they said, get on out there with a camera. And that's exactly what he did. Of course, CNN is out there saying, well, we just did good reporting and good intelligence gathering, and that's how we knew to be there when this all went down here. William Barr is already proving to be a disappointment. As you know, he is President Trump's Attorney General nominee, and he's saying that he does not agree with this lock her up chant directed at Hillary Clinton. And then after that, he said he does not believe in selective prosecutions. Now, even worse, Lindsey Graham has assured America that Barr is a really good friend of Robert Mueller, which apparently came as a major shock to President Trump. Apparently, nobody on his staff did the due diligence to find out this guy and who he was. So Graham is trying to present himself as a MAGA supporter while he works his hooks into Trump. And Graham has been putting pro-amnesty provisions into the bills Jared Kushner is pushing. So Trump has picked another deep state loser. Of course, that may be all that's in Washington, D.C. What can I tell you? Over at Judicial Watch, they're suing for the records of former FBI counsel Baker's communications with the anti-Trump dossier author Christopher Steele. And Judicial Watch filed a lawsuit against the DOJ for all records of communications from January 2016 to January 2018 to try and basically find exactly how this whole dossier got created, how it got funded, who was really behind it. I mean, we all pretty much know, but Judicial Watch wants the actual evidence. So they're suing for any and all records of communications, including but not limited to emails, text messages, instant chats sent between Baker and any of the following individuals: former British intelligence officer Steele, principal of Orbis Business Intelligence Limited, Glenn Simpson of Fusion GPS, former GPS contractor Nellie Orr, and or David Korn, a reporter with Mother Jones magazine. By the way, a little story came on out regarding Nellie Orr. It seems that when she was with Fusion GPS, she was researching the Trump children, trying to find something there that they could use. Do you remember the DNC fraud lawsuit? This was a lawsuit that was filed by Democratic voters who felt, they had been supporting Bernie Sanders. They had been donating to the DNC to support Bernie Sanders. And when it came on out that the DNC basically rigged the primaries for Hillary Clinton, these frustrated Democratic voters sued. And it's just dragging through the courts. The suit is against the DNC and former chair Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And it basically talks about actual election rigging. The lawyer who's representing the plaintiffs in the fraud lawsuit is Jared Beck. And apparently Twitter has just suspended him. They don't want him being able to reach out and share things with the public. So the lawsuit has forced the DNC's counsel to admit a number of shocking stances, including statements suggesting that the party had every right to choose the candidates in the back rooms and that election rigging is protected by the First Amendment. That's what they're actually saying, that vote fraud is protected by the First Amendment. I really don't think so. The First Amendment exists to protect the truth, not to protect lies and liars here. And we're getting our daily dose of booga booga. This again from Dan Coates, the U.S. Director of National Intelligence, and is out there saying that Russia and China will meddle in the 2020 elections. And he says, we assess that foreign actors will view the 2020 U.S. elections as an opportunity to advance their interests. Well, they've been screaming about foreign intervention in our elections, ignoring, of course, Israel, and they haven't come up with any evidence about it. Now, Mueller's reports are, his final report is due to come on out very, very soon. And there's going to be nothing in there. He's nailed a few people, made a big smash in the press with Roger Stone's arrest, but his original mandate was Trump, Russia collusion, and he's found nothing. He's found absolutely nothing, and nobody has been able to document Russian interference in our elections. The Democrats are still out there screaming the DNC email hack, but we already know that wasn't a hack, that was an internal leak. So, anyway, more booga booga, and this is coming from Zero Hedge. Russia, China, and several other nations are developing powerful high-altitude nuclear bombs that can produce super electromagnetic pulse waves capable of knocking out critical electronic infrastructure, according to several declassified 2017 reports from the now-defunct Commission to Assess the Threat to the United States from EMP Attack. What's really interesting is I was watching the news, and Rachel Maddow was doing a story about this incredibly intense cold that we're going through right now, and she just felt obliged to go on in there. You know, if Russia were to set off an imp weapon right now and knock out the electricity, so many Americans would die, or words to that effect. But just had to, oh, we have a caller on the line, James in Charlotte. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, good afternoon, Mike. Yeah, something I thought I'd just throw in here. This may sound like just gossip. I don't mean for it to. My sister is an attorney, and she had told me about a friend of hers who had some dealings with Trump, and through his, I think, through one of his hotels, and she had basically found out that, or had heard that he absolutely never reads anything. If he gets a report on something, he'll hand it to one of his associates or somebody that works for him and says, tell me what's in this report. I think that may be one of the problems he may be having, that he's got this phalanx of underlings that are giving him either bad advice, either unintentionally or maybe intentionally.
Well, again, the point of that story of him having this little upset with the intelligence chiefs is he's apparently already made up his mind, or he's getting information from like John Bolton, and it's being contradicted by the intelligence chiefs, and Trump apparently just threw a tantrum.
Well, yeah, that would tend to support what she had told me about what she had heard about him. That he just will not do any research. He just never does his homework on anything, and I don't know. He's trusting people that he probably shouldn't be trusting. He should have done a lot of firing when he first came into office.
I agree with you on that one. I agree with you on that one.
Yeah. Well, that's just what I wanted to throw out, and it'll probably prove itself out over time that he's going to pay the price for not having good research and not having more people that can be trusted around him.
Yeah, he certainly will. I think at this point he's a one-term president.
Well, he may not even make it to the full.
It's entirely possible.
Yeah. Well, that's basically all I wanted to throw out to you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and we have a caller waiting on the line that's described as not sure. So, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? I'm probably going to have to take you through the commercial break.
Hey, Mike.
Yes, you're on the air.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure, but my name is not sure. Okay. So, you know what? I've donated to you and the program, and I really like your program, but keep saying that the government's not looking out for us, and, you know, I can prove to you logically that they are. Through logic, they are looking out for us.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're coming up here on a commercial break, and when we come back from the commercial break, we'll let you have the podium and see if you can make your case. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And on the phone, we have an individual who calls himself Not Sure. And he's going to demonstrate to us logically that the government really does care about us and is looking out for us. So go ahead.
Okay, well, first of all, we know that racism is the worst thing ever. I mean, that's a given. I mean, you know that, like, you could cut up 50 puppies with a chainsaw. That would not be as bad as using the N-word, right? I mean, everybody knows that.
I sort of come down on the side of the puppies, but that's just me.
Okay, so, I mean, that's a given. So I look at your site, and I see some other people out there I really like what's his name, Corbett, some of these people, and they're great people. I know you guys are under harassment, but and you have threats of censorship against you, but you know there's some people out there like Daily Stormer, some pages like Daily Stormer and Chris Cantwell. Those guys don't have access to credit card processors, PayPal. They've been shut down from all social media. They don't have Patreon. They don't have any access to Patreon. They don't have any access to any crowdfunding sites. And it's because they're racist. I mean, they're racist sites. And you know that the government is working with these banks to make sure that these guys don't have any access to any funding. And that's the way it should be, because they're racist. And they should be shutting down those racist sites. So,
well, I would argue, just to take the devil's advocate position, I don't agree with racism, but I do agree that we do have freedom of speech in this country. And we know that our government intentionally fans up racism to keep us divided from each other and angry with each other, so we don't unite together as a single American people and start taking a really good look at what our government has been doing.
Well, the government, you know, the government is shutting down these racist sites. I mean, the government is working with the banks to make sure that Anglin and Cantwell and these guys don't have any funding at all, don't have any access to any money. So that just proves that the government is on our side and the government's looking out for us.
I don't really see the logical connection between the two. I mean, we're seeing more and more censorship, not just of racist sites. They're starting to censor GMO sites. I'm expecting there to be attacks on vaccine safety websites. Over Natural News, they've been deplatformed. When the government is denying us information of all sorts, especially information related to our health, I don't see that as consistent with the idea that they're looking out for us. I just see it.
Well, you look at Daily Stormer. I mean, they've gone through like I think 14 or 18 different URLs because they were actually completely cut off from the internet, and I think only the government can really have the power to, you know, affect that kind of censorship. So, I mean, these racist sites have got to be shut down, Mike. I mean, the most important thing, it's worse than cutting up a bunch of puppy dogs, being racist.
Well, like I said, I come
Mike.
down on the side of the puppy dogs. There are a lot of problems that we're all dealing with right now. Racism is one. Bad chemicals in our food is another. GMO is another. Vaccines that don't work and are actually harmful, that's another one. The impending wars, that's another problem. The economy, which is just struggling and trembling on the edge of an abyss right now. There's all kinds of things that we're having to deal with right now. And racism is bad, I'll grant you, but the fact that racist websites are being shut down does not convince me that the government is actually taking care of us so much as simply engaging in censorship. Now, I've never been to those websites that you mentioned. I don't know exactly what they were saying. There may have been other things on those websites besides the racism that the government wanted to see shut down. So I don't really know. Anyway, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. And getting on back to this situation in Virginia. Now, as you know, up in New York, they already have the law, was signed by Cuomo, allowing abortion up to the moment of delivery. And they're looking at the same bill down in Virginia, and Virginia's governor has endorsed it, which this is Governor Ralph Northam. He's a Democrat, and he did an interview with WTOP-FM yesterday and was out there just trying to make it, the case. And he said that if a woman were to desire an abortion as she's going into labor, the baby would be delivered and then resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired. And then a discussion would ensue between the doctors and the mother. Well, I'm sorry, the mother has had 9 months to decide if she wants to keep the baby or not. And I don't know if this is, to get larger baby parts for Planned Parenthood, but it does strike me as onerous in the extreme. Okay, we got to take a break for commercials. We got a caller waiting on the line, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to take another phone call. Joe in California. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, Mike. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't hate to violate the one call rule, but I had to call and just express my bewilderment and anger at this last caller. It seems like he was trying to equate some sites that have maybe 10 subscribers with your site, James Corbett. I don't know who this guy was. He seems like he was a plant. But
I just got an email from somebody expressing the same. CNN. Yeah, I just got an email from somebody expressing exactly the same thought.
Outrageous.
Yeah, it is outrageous. And again, he just kept, hitting on that racism should be shut down. And I agree, racism is bad. Okay.
Absolutely.
But again, we also have that First Amendment, and you have to walk a very, very fine line. And that means that when these websites he's talking about come on out and say something that is racially offensive, we all have a First Amendment right to say, we think you're full of it. And that is the proper way to handle these discussions.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Chris in Cleveland. Aloha, Chris. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. What's up? Hello?
You're on the air.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I hear you just fine.
I was chiming in on the same topic. Censorship is always to be persuaded from. That's ridiculous. You want to have all opinions available on the spectrum of the platform, if you will. Okay?
Yes.
And you're going to have certain people that are going to be total jerks, and there's nothing you can do about it, but you want them to be free to say what they have to say.
Yes, absolutely.
So, they're out there, and it's out in the open, and we're all good,
Yeah.
So,
no, we have to hang on to that First Amendment. If we let that one go, if we let the government undermine that one, and they're already trying. They're trying to get an Israel exception to the First Amendment. And if they do that, it won't stop there. Censorship never sits still.
That's not cool either. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Then there'll be a GMO exception, and a vaccine exception, and there won't be any more freedom of speech. There'll just be permitted speech.
There's a reason it was number one.
Yes.
Because it was the most important one, more than the guns. Some people like to cling to the bitter clingers, their Bibles and their guns, right?
Yes.
The freedom to say what's on your mind is much more important than all the other ones combined, actually.
It actually is, and it's a shame that in our present society, the corporate media doesn't understand why that First Amendment is there. It's so that they can report on what the government is doing wrong. And this goes back to Justice Black's decision in the Nixon versus the New York Times and Washington Post. The press exists to serve the governed, not the governors. And our corporate media has forgotten that. They've gone totally over to the other side. And that's why there's an independent media out here now. You know, we're doing the job
right.
the traditional media is supposed to be doing.
And it's been perverted, the role of the press. I mean, there was all kinds of nonsense going on, craziness, insanity in the late 60s and early 70s if you tried to fathom it, it would probably drive any sane man out of his mind.
Yeah.
But you can kind of regard it, you can look back at it and regard it in a general sense and, you know, see it for what it was. It was morphing into what it has become now, where maybe it was originally set up to be this force of controlling how people think, forming the thoughts of the individual.
It kind of goes back to the end of World War II when the CIA was studying the propaganda methods of the Third Reich and decided they needed to adopt some of them here. And of course, one of the first ones they did was Operation Mockingbird, which is where they made sure that the top management positions at all of the major media were held by CIA assets.
Puppets on strings.
Okay, so anything else?
Syria? What do you think about Syria?
I think we ought to get out of there. I don't think we are, but I think we ought to get out of there.
Saw an interesting thing the other day. I don't like RT, Russia Today. It gets on my nerves, but sometimes there's a guy called Peter Lavelle. Actually, he's got a little similar to you, reminds me of you a little bit. But he has some good shows sometimes, and I picked up one of their things on BitChute, of all places.
Yeah.
That they were talking about the real politic, essentially, of withdrawing directly out of Syria. And what they were saying was it was interesting because they were definitely on the Russian, media thing, but they're saying like you can't just pull out like that and not betray a lot of people that they have relationships with. So there is a common sense. Basically, there's a common sense argument for like pulling out right away is kind of bad too. You can't win.
I mean,
there's no win.
There are established relations between the United States and some of these fringe groups, and who knows what all else. We already know that the U.S. has been evacuating the commanders of these groups, and no doubt if we do pull out of Syria, they'll all be brought to the United States, and they'll wind up with 7-Eleven franchises. But the United States has not hesitated to just abandon people in the past when things don't go their way. The Kurds used to be U.S. allies, and I think the U.S. is getting ready to abandon them as well.
But where the rubber hits the road, you actually have individual men involved with these things, and these aren't bad guys. I don't know anyone in Syria. Do you know a corporal or a lieutenant or a member of the United States Army who is in Syria? Do you know anyone like this?
No, I really don't. The last military person I knew was actually in Iraq, and we used to send him these big boxes of water filters because the water they were getting was so terrible. Anyway, listen, Chris, need to let you go.
They're not bad guys. That's what I want to say. They are not bad guys. So, all right, Mike.
All right, Chris, we're going to let you go. and switch over to Dave in Delaware. Aloha, Dave. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Doing okay.
Hey, I was just calling in about the previous caller about the Daily Stormer. I don't see what's wrong with the Daily Stormer website. Like, have you ever gone there?
Nope.
No? If you go on there, you check it out. They got a cool a video about Chris Christie. He was on the Colbert Show. Like, they're getting drunk, and he's talking about how Jared Kushner is really, like, in control of the White House right now. There was a story, like, when Christie was going to be, like, he was going to head Trump's transition campaign.
Yep.
It was all said and done, but then Kushner came in there at the last minute and was like, he told Trump, like, no, you can't do that because, you know, there was like this long feud with Christie. Like, I guess Christie put like Kushner's father in prison because Christie was, like, Kushner's father, like, hired some prostitutes to set up his brother-in-law to, like, get some shady business deal or something like that.
Yeah.
So, like, Kushner was so mad, like, from years and years and years. And he basically told Trump, he was like, no, you can't do it. And Trump was like, oh, okay. And, like, Kushner even talked about how, like, the rabbis should have, like, been involved with it. Like, they should have taken it to court and stuff like that. It just shows you who's in control of this country, Mike. I mean, and then him talking about the Daily Stormer, how it's racist. The term racist was first used by Leon Trotsky.
Yes.
He was a communist Jew. He was part of, you know, he's Jewish. And they use it to, like, browbeat people. Like, anything that you say that they don't agree with, they just say, oh, that's racist. They try to shut it down. The same way they do with, like, when they call people anti-Semitic, you know? Anytime you criticize anything about Israel or any of that, oh, you're anti-Semitic. I had called you before, and I told you, the caller about the Daily Stormer, he was basically telling you that it's the government that are shutting down everything, like all this stuff. Trump's behind it. All this censorship of freedom of speech and all, just don't get it, Mike. So,
well, Trump
Trump
has never made it a secret that he's an Israel supporter, and were they to try and pass a federalized anti-BDS bill like they're doing in the Senate, I'm afraid that Trump would probably sign it. At which point somebody's going to have to take it to the Supreme Court and say, we do have freedom of speech in this country.
I mean, I get it, Mike, but then to even talk about, like, he's still out there saying that he has, you know, I had two great Supreme Court justices. The guy, Gorsuch or whatever, right? He cucked on Trump. Like, when it came down to DACA and all that, he sided against him on all that immigration stuff. And then the last guy, what was it, Kavanaugh? He sided against them. He sided with Planned Parenthood. I mean, it's like, it's a big joke, Mike. Like, and then my only thing with you is now you're still pushing, like, all of a sudden that, you know, Chelsea Gabbard is going to do something. Okay, yeah, she says she's anti-war, right? What did Trump say? He said he's anti-war.
So did Obama.
What did he do? He cussed, I know. But you know what she's anti-Second Amendment. So you know right there that she's going to, you know, she's definitely going to be for that. So, like, I don't understand, like, I get it. You want people to vote or do all this stuff, but I'm not buying into it anymore. There's no getting around it. And I know you say, oh, we're waiting for, you know, the Soviet era style collapse and all that stuff, but I don't know, Mike. It's just, there's something's going on, man. And then one other thing I wanted to tell you. I know how you always talk about the opioid crisis, right?
Yes.
You don't talk about who's behind it. It's the Sackler family. It's a Jewish family, Mike. They own Purdue Pharma.
Okay, you know, we're getting into this, you know, where you're gratuitously Jewish this, and it's not just the Sackler. It's not just the It's not just the Sackler family. I mean, the CIA's caught up in it. The military's caught up in it. You know, there are a lot of people.
I'm talking about OxyContin, Mike. The creators of it, the ones that unleashed this opioid into the world.
Dave, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. All right. We have a rule here about painting with a broad brush. There are a lot of people who are profiting from the drug trade. Not all of them are Jewish. So it is a problem. It is a crisis.
A couple comments about Venezuela, if I could.
Sure.
Okay. My son-in-law was born and raised there, and his whole family still lives there in and around Caracas. He's the only one that lives in the States. And couple days ago, you had a caller that was listening to a video, and they were talking about the country kind of falling into a dictatorship and things that are going on and the corruption that is occurring. And it pretty much goes along with what my son-in-law tells me when he talks to his family. He talks to them about twice a week down there to see what's going on. And they were very pro-Chavez. And when Maduro was elected the first time, things started heading what they feel was in the wrong direction. All the money that Chavez was filtering down to the people slowly started drying up, and they saw all this money going to the top, like to the elites, I guess you might say.
Yes.
And so he was didn't get much support, and they with the socialist program, like General Motors was a big manufacturer down there, and when Maduro got in office, he pretty much seized all the assets of General Motors and the factory, and they no longer have production down there. And I believe Ford Motor had to write down millions and millions of dollars that they lost down there, and I'm not even sure if they manufacture anymore. So they lost a lot of jobs, and other companies have left also because of that reason. They're being taken over. And you've spoken about the transparency of their election, and it's true that they have pretty strong voter ID laws down there, but what I'm hearing from him is that their elections are only as good as the people that are counting the votes. So people go down there with good intentions and they vote, and then the votes are carted away to a back room, and they're being counted by the Maduro government, basically.
Well, let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
If the elections are not being honest, then why did the opposition take control of the legislature?
Well, they did take control, and then at the same time, I believe that he has silenced the opposition and forced a lot of them into hiding, and there have been some deaths. And I think he did some rewriting of the Constitution, and they have some sort of superpower parliament down there that overrides everything that the opposition tries to put into action down there.
Well, there's a lot of information floating around about the situation in Venezuela, and unfortunately a lot of it is basically fraudulent to try and sell the idea that we have to go into Venezuela. You know, we really don't have any business there. In fact,
right.
We really don't have any business in any of these countries we've gone into, whether it's Syria or Iraq or Afghanistan or anything. Anyway, listen, Dale, got to let you go, got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're talking about these horrible law in New York, and looks like they're going to try and pass it in Virginia, allowing a woman to choose to have an abortion right up to the moment of birth. And apparently the governor of Virginia has endorsed it. He went on the radio to try and basically justify it, saying that the baby could actually be born, and if the mother decides she doesn't want it, it's infanticide. So the Democrats have this new platform of post-birth abortion, and I think this may backflash on them. I think this is going to help the GOP. I think even people who are okay with abortion in like the first trimester, they're going to look at this and say, no, this is definitely wrong. This is definitely wrong. Now, one of the legislators in Virginia, Dawn Adams, has admitted that she didn't actually read the bill, and she attached her name to it. and she's saying that she made a mistake and that she doesn't want to be associated with it anymore, which I think was a good thing. And I've seen all kinds of articles from medical personnel saying, no, they're not going to do this. You know what's really funny? Back during the 2016 campaign, Donald Trump was saying the Democrats are going to go for late-term abortions, and Hillary just said, oh, you're just being crazy. They're here. I don't know. I think Donald Trump ought to pass a bill saying it's okay to abort babies up to 120 years of age as long as they're liberal. Now, over in Philadelphia, as you know, there's Mumia Abu-Jamal, and Larry Krasner, Philadelphia's new progressive district attorney, took office, and he vowed to make the office's goals seeking justice instead of just seeking convictions. Unfortunately, it looks like he's flinched. Now, last December 27th, there was a decision by the Philadelphia Common Pleas Judge Leon Tucker ordering new hearings by the state Supreme Court on the 4 appeals by Mumia Abu-Jamal. Now, Jamal is in prison, and he's been there for a long, long time. He's accused of shooting a police officer, but a lot of people don't think he did it. The original trial was deeply, deeply flawed, and he's won this right for an appeal. And this new district attorney is appealing the appeal, doesn't want it to go forward, because it would be embarrassing for the police department. It would be embarrassing for the FBI that railroaded this guy. Same reason that Leonard Peltier will never be let out of jail. He's an embarrassment to the FBI. The FBI's primary commandment, going all the way back to J. Edgar Hoover, is never embarrass the agency. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification. We've got a caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're going to take a phone call from Mike in Colorado. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, thanks for taking my call. I hate to jump back, but when you talk about New York and Virginia, I sure hope that there are some district attorneys who are willing to pursue charges if these procedures are done, only from the aspect that at about 30 weeks, a premature baby is viable outside of the womb without machines. And at that point, you have to stop calling it a fetus. So there's got to be some legal framework for them to prosecute anyone who does follow their new ideas.
I would like to hope that there's going to be, because you're talking about a viable human being who's capable of surviving on their own, with the usual incubator and blankets and feeding and everything. This is an absolutely horrible thing that New York is doing and Virginia's trying to do.
Yeah, it's incredible, and I don't know. To me, it just, as a species, you don't kill your own species so your species can survive on this place. It's insane to me.
It is absolutely insane, and I don't know why the Democrats were pushing for this. I mean, if a woman wants an abortion, she can get it in that first trimester. That's when she should make the decision. And nobody, I mean, there's a big debate about when exactly does life start in the womb. But I'm sure pretty much everybody's going to agree with me that by the time of birth, it's alive. It's a live human being.
Well, thanks for covering the topic. I sure appreciate your show. Have a good day, sir.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open. Now, as you know, the corporate media is not doing very well. They're losing viewership. Ad revenues are down. Some of them have been caught cheating on their metrics, which didn't work as well. BuzzFeed is letting people go. Huffington Post is letting people go. And President Trump basically came on out with a bunch of tweets saying that it's the fake news that's to blame for the lost media jobs. And he's absolutely correct. Nobody likes being lied to. And over the last several years, Americans have woken up to the fact that corporate media's job is to lie to you, to sell you things, a new car, a new dress, a new candidate, a new war, a new tax. And so, yeah, you get lied to enough. You turn off that TV dial, you change the channel, you go to someplace else. And the corporate media, right now, they're running in the red. I mean, they're being propped up by their corporate masters to keep them going, to keep the propaganda going. But they're no longer successful business enterprises because they forgot that their job is to report the facts to the people, not just constant spin cycle. Turning to the economic news here, apparently the euro has eased a little bit after a poor Eurozone gross domestic product data. Italy has slipped into actual recession. And as you know, Trump and representatives from China met today in the Oval Office. They're trying to work out a trade deal. And Trump is saying he will not accept a trade deal unless China opens Chinese markets to manufacturers, bankers, and farmers. Well, I thought they pretty much already were. But he's out there talking tough here. There's a new street crime, if you will, that's out there, and it has to do with palladium. Now, palladium is used in catalytic converters to basically clean up the exhaust from your car. And there's so much demand for palladium, the price has gone through the roof. Palladium has hit a lifetime high of $1,400 per 10 ounce on January of this year, and that's about 50% over the past 4 months. That represents a seven-fold rise from its price of less than $200 an ounce about a decade ago. Actually, it's $1,400.10 per ounce. I misread that. So unfortunately, this has triggered street criminals to basically go on out, crawl under cars, and rip out the catalytic converters. Now, some enterprising people are going on out and they're buying old used cars that really don't run anymore to get that catalytic converter, because at $1,400 an ounce, you know, that's enough money to buy an old junker car. Back down in Venezuela, they're studying several measures to react to the new U.S. sanctions against the state-run oil firm PDVSA, including a partial force majeure. Now, force majeure is a term in contract law that basically says something unexpected, something that wasn't foreseen by the contractors and contractees has now happened, and you invoke force majeure, and basically you can make some sweeping decisions. So apparently Trump announced these sanctions aimed at driving Maduro from power by curbing crude exports to the United States. Now, the United States has a lot of oil. I don't know that we import all that much from Venezuela, but Venezuela has other countries that it exports to. Now then, over in Wisconsin, Foxconn is having second thoughts about building a plant to make advanced liquid crystal display panels. They were going to spend $10 billion on this Wisconsin campus, and said it intends to hire mostly engineers and researchers rather than the manufacturing workforce the project originally promised. Now, this was a big deal that Donald Trump touted about bringing the jobs back to the United States. And apparently, you know, back in 2017, they announced there was going to be a 20 million square foot campus, marked the largest greenfield investment by a foreign-based company in the U.S. history, was praised by Donald Trump as proof of his ability to revive American manufacturing. Unfortunately, Foxconn, which received controversial state and local incentives to the project, initially planned to manufacture advanced large screen displays for TVs and other consumer and professional products at the facility, and now it's saying it's going to build the smaller LCD screens instead. Well, there are going to be some jobs there, but it sounds like they're getting cold feet here. Central bank gold buying is at an all-time high, and Peter Schiff is out there saying that Fed capitulation may be the beginning of the end. Everybody knows there's a correction coming. Everybody's now actually admitting that if it weren't for the Federal Reserve, the stock market would have already crashed by now. The Federal Reserve is literally propping it up. Over in Iran and Syria have enabled their banks to conduct transactions in their local currencies and non-dollar foreign currencies, lifting a key hurdle to their trade and investments. So this is what's happening from all of these sanctions and tariffs. The world economy is turning away from the U.S. dollar. And short of invading them all and shooting them all, there's really not much the U.S. can do about it. That's one of the reasons to go into Venezuela. Bring back the petrodollar. Say Venezuela's oil is for sale, but only for the U.S. dollar. That was the agenda in Iraq. It was certainly the agenda in Libya. Certainly the agenda had they won in Syria. Getting the world back dependent on the U.S. dollar for their oil. But Iran and Syria saying, nope, we're going to use our own currencies here. According to Fabien Chalandon, who's a French private investor, the failure of France and Italy, rented lips, to lead their economies out of crisis could actually bring down the euro and the Eurozone itself. And so Fabien was explaining in an interview with Sputnik how the impoverishment of the lower part of the middle class had given a boost to the rise of populism in Europe. And I'm sure the open borders had a big impact on that as well. And the Eurosceptic parties keep coming out on top in Italy. Macron and Theresa May are finding themselves in dire straits fighting against populism. And they're out there saying bizarre things like, populism, that's evil, it's bad. No, it's the will of the people. That's how democracy is supposed to work here. Over at the EU Parliament, leader Antonio Tajani is insisting that Brussels must put in a permanent mechanism that will spread third world migrants throughout the bloc, and went on to declare that Italian efforts to block migrant boats from Africa is a betrayal of Europe and its citizens. I would take the exact opposite view. I think opening up the borders and allowing all of those refugees into the country, carrying diseases, committing crimes, committing rapes, I think that was the betrayal of Europe and its citizens. The one thing you expect a government to do is protect the borders from the barbarians. And that did not happen. And apparently the Italians' remarks came as open borders backing NGOs were attempting to increase pressure on Rome to open the country's ports to a Sea-Watch vessel carrying a batch of 47 migrants it picked up off the coast of Libya last week. A senior Pentagon official, John Rood, is out there now saying there are no less than 3 migrant caravans heading to the United States border with Mexico. One of them has swelled to over 12,000 people. And Rood said there are currently more than 2,300 active duty troops at the southern border, down from a high of 5,900 in November. They're going to need a lot more than that to deal with 12,000 people. And defense officials say several thousand more active duty troops are expected to head to the border in the coming weeks. Now, here's an idea. What about the area denial weapon? This is that microwave thing that makes your skin feel like it's burning. Why are those not being set up along the border? We've already paid for them. Another story on the same topic here. This is from Russia Today. A few thousand U.S. military service members will be sent to the border with Mexico in the coming days, the Pentagon has confirmed, as another migrant caravan made its way north from Honduras. So this situation is just out of control. Now, Trump's super PAC has launched a 7-figure ad campaign called Angel Mom, and it features Angel Mom Michelle Root, whose daughter Sarah was murdered by an illegal immigrant back in 2016. And so she's there on the screen basically saying that her separation from her daughter is permanent. She can't get her back. And it's a reminder that immigration is just causing all kinds of problems and costing all kinds of money. Now, here's an interesting little story. This is from the Political Insider. Democrat leaders expressing willingness to consider funding for the border barrier. And apparently, congressional lawmakers begun their negotiations yesterday. And some of the Democratic leaders said they're not going to draw a hard line against the barrier funding at the southern border, trying to get this thing going. Well, that's all except Nancy Pelosi, who has dug her heels in yet again, saying there will not be any wall money. They want those borders open. They want those Democratic voters. Now, the Department of Defense is out there saying that there's absolutely nothing stopping Trump from authorizing the military to build a border wall, and he wouldn't have to declare a national emergency to do it. And I remember an article that we had a little while ago about how the Pentagon has a lot of unallocated funds, money that they were given by previous Congress that they just wound up never actually spending, and they could use that. But Trump's got to do something. He absolutely has got to do something, or he's not going to have a chance in 2020. Americans are waiting for him to take care of this problem. Now, the Trump Organization recently got scandalized because apparently over at the Trump National Golf Club in Westchester County, they discovered some undocumented immigrant workers working there, and they have now been fired. They're now trying to sue. And as a result, the Trump Organization is now going to use the E-Verify system for all worker status checks. So I think that's a good thing. Getting back on over to Great Britain and the Brexit circus, and it certainly is turning into one here. Theresa May is trying to play hardball with the EU today. She put off her planned trip to Brussels until next week after Jean-Claude Juncker insisted the Brexit deal as it is now was the best possible and could not be renegotiated. They're both basically glaring at each other. And cabinet ministers are saying this is just what the EU does. At the last moment, they'll cave in. I don't think so. I mean, they got everything they wanted from that Chequers plan. They don't really want Great Britain to go in other than name only. They want that British money pouring on in. They want Britain's economy linked into the European Central Bank. They want England compelled to continue the Open Borders Project. They want England basically to submit to European Union regulation. That doesn't sound like a Brexit to me. And tempers are flaring over there. Apparently, Tony Blair came on out with a rant calling on members of Parliament to stand up and tell the British public they know more about Brexit than them. I think this was Tony Blair's let him eat cake moment. But he came on out saying that politicians know best what to do on Brexit because it's their day job. Well, Tony, you do live in a nation with elections, and the election has happened. And the British people don't want to be part of Europe any longer. Now, Tony Blair is a globalist. He's always been a globalist. Always going to be a globalist. And Soros is throwing huge amounts of money into making this happen. He just transferred something like $18 billion of his personal fortune into the Open Borders Society. That's a lot of money, and I'm sure it's being very generously shared out with everybody who pushed that globalist agenda. Anyway, the Democratic leadership of the House is planning to introduce a flurry of anti-gun bills in the coming months, and the most ambitious concerns an outright ban on what they are describing as assault weapons. They want them to go away. And again, as we reported before, even the Department of Justice is saying gun laws don't work because the criminals are getting their guns from illegal sources. The gun laws are only disarming the law-abiding citizen, leaving them wide open to be robbed, burglarized, raped, because the police aren't going to get there in time. When seconds matter, the police can be there in minutes. Roughly about 18 last time I checked. And the social justice warriors are at it again. Apparently, the New York Times basically actually came on out with this idea that photos of soot-covered people are blackface and therefore racist. And for the Times, it was Mary Poppins and the Chimney Sweeps that they took issue with. They also took issue, apparently, with a photo of soot-covered coal miners, saying they're blackface and it's racist. No, it isn't. It's coal dust. That's what coal miners get. That's what chimney sweeps get. It's getting very silly out there. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And a lot of people have been talking about this NewsGuard browser plugin, which is optional for you to use unless you're using the mobile version of Edge. Then it comes built in. And it's claiming to certify the real news for you. You know, don't think for yourself. We'll tell you what to believe. But if you look at the people who are basically on its board of directors, you've got Richard Stengel, former editor of Time magazine. Back in 2011, he was criticized for several factual errors in a cover story for Time magazine. The Huffington Post called him out for inaccurate statements in an article entitled Stengelgate, and most recently he jumped in to attack the Covington High School boys without stopping to get the facts or watch the footage. This is not somebody that you want to have deciding for you what you're going to see. Then you've got General Michael Hayden, former director of the CIA, heavy promoter of the Russian collusion theory, keeps attacking President Trump. And his comparison of the president's proposed border wall to the Holocaust caused a lot of outrage. And again, he's got a clear bias going in there. And finally, there's Jessica Lessin, former Wall Street Journal reporter. She's under heavy fire for her defense of Facebook's handling, or the lack thereof, of fake news stories, especially after her deep connections to Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg came to light. Apparently, Lessin and her husband have been friends with Zuckerberg for years. They were even rumored to be a member of the wedding party when they got married. So why would you trust any of these people? Trust yourself. You need to trust yourself. All right, we got callers loading up the lines here. Gary in Arkansas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello? Am
You're
I
on the air.
I didn't hear the pop.
Well, you're on the air.
Okay, I wanted to make a quick comment on the Democratic push for gun laws. Now, there has been at least 5 or 6, and probably even a lot more, decisions by the U.S. Supreme Court that all gun laws regarding ownership and wearing or bearing, I guess you would say, carrying.
Yes.
All laws passed on that topic is unconstitutional and therefore not lawful. So I don't understand why they keep trying to pass these laws when the Supreme Court has decided, at least upon 6 occasions, that all gun laws violate the Second Amendment and the right to bear and carry guns.
Well, you know, it does seem to be a fool's errand because now we've got a more conservative Supreme Court. And I don't know what Kavanaugh's view on firearms and the Second Amendment happens to be, but the Democrats like to keep pushing on this, like this, you know, abortion at birth time. I mean, it's like they don't really have any good ideas anymore, so they just keep going back to the same well and say, we want gun control, we want abortion, we want this, we want that.
I'm going to get an American passport as an American national, and I'm going to claim that my Constitution is that the one of 1776, and I am not a U.S. citizen, and therefore this U.S. citizen of USA Inc. Does not have control over the venue or jurisdiction. I doubt if it'll work, but I'm sure going to try it.
It probably won't here. But again, the Democrats have to look like they're doing something now that they're in charge of the House, and along with blocking Trump's wall, going after the guns,
I
is
like
something that they go back to.
Idea. You file paperwork, and he's got the paperwork, and you don't ever go to court. You don't. You file the paperwork that keeps you out of their courtroom. And he's time and time again, these little county, municipal, and district and courts, they call them in the states, that there is no legal basis under the Constitution for those even be in business. So, and also, when they charge you under a USC, that has never been signed into law by both houses of the Congress and the Senate. Now, the Senate voted to pay for the printing of the codification of the USC, but it never voted to enact the USC. But if you use that defense on going into court, you have to bring it out immediately at the head of the case. Otherwise, if you try to bring it up halfway or further through the case, they say, well,
Gary, I'm going to have to let you go. Gary, I'm really sorry. We're at another commercial break. I'm going to have to let you go. We're going to be back with more phone calls after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones to Tom in Florida. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. Good evening. Michael. Michael, what's on my mind is what's going on with this Roger Stone being arrested by, 60, 70 FBI agents? And that's been all over every news network.
They sent more people after him than went after Osama bin Laden.
Yes, it's unbelievable, Michael. But I'll tell you what's really got me perplexed is I've been following the news, and not one network other than Fox has talked about the 4 Americans who were murdered by the 19-year-old El Salvadorian. This guy went in these people's houses, Michael, and brutally murdered them. I believe he used a gun on the husband, the one man. He actually took the gun from him and shot him and the wife, and then he went into another house and shot another couple. This is unbelievable. And this Pelosi is not talking. Pelosi needs to be arrested, Michael, for what she's done with this aiding and abetting these illegals. I don't understand why their arrest warrants are not being issued for her and Schumer, because they've literally had Americans get murdered, sanctuary cities, and these murders are brutal, Michael. That was a brutal slaying of 4 Americans, and I believe there was another one that got shot. I think there was a 5th victim. But I know OAN hasn't said nothing about it. OAN has talked about it in Fox, but CNN, MSLSD, none of these other networks are always saying nothing. The Democratic networks.
What?
Because can you imagine if the Republicans were to run that ad on Tuesday night when Trump?
Okay, sorry.
Hello?
I'm sorry. I thought Claire was calling for me.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Michael, you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. And I know we were talking about what's going on with Roger Stone and Mueller and everything. So
right. I'm talking about Pelosi in the sanctuary cities, Michael. What are they going to do with the sanctuary city deal? Trump.
Well, all of these are Title VIII violations, and that's where this is all breaking down. The laws are on the books. They are simply not being enforced.
Absolutely not. And somebody needs to be arrested because Americans are dying because of this.
Yes.
And that slaying in Reno, Nevada is disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. The Molly Tibbetts case that you don't even hear about anymore. Molly Tibbetts.
Yes.
Kate Steinle. You don't even hear about those stories. It's disgusting. Those are American. Those people had families. They're never going to be with their families again. But you're worried about all the kids coming in, the illegals. Why don't they stay in their own country and fix their own country? Like Venezuela.
Well, that would be a really good suggestion,
it.
but can you see the hypocrisy here where the Democrats are claiming that they're very concerned about all these children coming across the border from the South, and yet they're out there pushing for abortion at birth?
There you go. That's another one. Oh, my goodness. That's unbelievable what I saw today about that. But getting back to the immigration invasion, Michael, Americans are getting shot and murdered in their own homes?
Yes.
Unbelievable.
It is. Well,
crazy.
It's not just murders. I mean, there's rapes, there's burglaries, there's thefts, and again, the illegal immigrant population in this country is costing more money to take care of year after year than it would take to build that wall.
Absolutely. And the traffic and the food consumption and the water, it's disgraceful. They need to stay in their own country, fix their own infrastructure, and leave this country alone. I mean, and if we don't have a leader, like, thank goodness we have Trump. Can you imagine Hillary, Michael?
Yes.
Can you imagine Hillary right now?
I shudder to think.
It'd be a disaster. I shudder. And, getting back to Kate Steinle, when that guy was able to get away because he found a gun and he shot the gun and it hit Ricochet and it killed her, that's still murder. You had no right to pick up a gun and pull the trigger out of where there's a crowd of people, and the bullet could actually do damage, which it did. It killed a beautiful young woman like her.
Yep.
She dies in her father's arms, and Pelosi never acknowledged that family, or Schumer. They should be arrested for that. For their aiding and colluding this illegal invasion. And Molly Tibbetts, look at a horrific story that she had to endure, Michael, before she was murdered.
Yeah, it is a mess.
And Democrats get away with this.
I'm very angry with Pelosi and Schumer for simply not caring about ordinary Americans. They just have their agenda, flood the country with illegal immigrants, get them to vote Democrat, and we will have all kinds of good stuff. All right, Tom, I got to let you go. We're getting short on time.
You got it, Michael. I
got another caller here, and then I got some news we need to get to. Dan in Illinois, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
In the county I live in Illinois, it's in between Rockford and Chicago. We have a big problem with the immigration. In one small area alone, there's been at least 4 car accidents with fatal and serious injuries where the illegals have ran back to Mexico after causing the accident. And this is in a short period of time. And where I work, they had 2 temp Mexicans come in, and they had a event going on the square in town, and they exchanged gunfire with a couple other guys. Nobody got hurt, and they took off back to Mexico. And one last thing. A long time ago when I started listening to John, when he was teamed up with Mark, somebody brought up the fact that each time these people do anything with this illegal name, cash a check, buy a car, buy a house, cash a paycheck, it's all an act of fraud. People don't even realize that.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. You and me do that, you'd be sitting behind bars right now.
Yeah, it does seem that in the pursuance of this globalist agenda, that corporate media is not reporting on the problems caused by the illegal immigrants, and the police are just, for all intents and purposes, they're looking the other way.
Oh, we got this one guy, one illegal sitting in the county. He's got a hold for some other agency, but he got busted for 300 grams of meth and over 900 grams of heroin. He's sitting in county. Yeah. This is a small county. There's another one sitting in there with like 300 grams of meth too. And it's just, this county's just screwed up. And that's because they just let it go. They had a big event, particular consular card.
Yeah.
Deal. The parking lot was jam-packed full. So that's what's going on in northern Illinois.
Well,
I'll let you go.
hunker down, and Trump's got to build that wall. But this has to come to a screeching halt. And then we've got to figure out some way where all the people who are in this country illegally and who do not qualify for asylum, they get kicked out again. Certainly before the 2020 election.
Yeah, because they're breaking laws every day. Every day that they cash a check, use a credit card, or make a house payment, anything. It's all an act of fraud. I wish I could do that.
Yeah.
I could send different names too,
I mean, it is a mess. It is a huge mess. I was looking at an article the other day that was just listing what this actually costs the country financially, and it's a vast sum of money, and it's straining our economy.
Yeah.
Anyway, Dan, I got to let you go. Thanks a lot for the phone call. We're going to go to Ken in New York. Aloha, Ken. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Booga booga.
Okay.
Okay. About Roger Stone, considering the excessive amount of force that was used just to arrest him, if that was even the goal of it, I don't understand why he should do something like Corsi did and file a criminal complaint. I think you could probably make a crime someplace about inciting to create manslaughter, perhaps. I think they were hoping that with all of those people involved, there might be some confusion and somebody might accidentally shoot him.
I disagree with that one. I mean, this whole thing was theatrical. It was to make Robert Mueller look good in the media. That's why they had the CNN guy there. And, of course, it was an act of intimidation. They wanted to rattle Roger Stone to make it easier to get him to, roll over on Trump.
But accidents do happen, especially with them.
Okay. Let me just send a message.
All right, that's all I have.
All right, thanks an awful lot here, and we're going to switch over to Pam in Boston. Aloha, Pam. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing fine.
I'm sporting a very awful cold. But how's Claire? Well?
Claire is doing better. We had good news from the doctor earlier this week, and they wanted her to go get another MRI to basically confirm that whatever this mass was in her back is in fact really gone, and that the technicians didn't mess up. So, we just keep working at it. Right now, it's all about pain management.
Oh, dear. Well, I hope she gets better quickly. But what I called about to talk about today, excuse my voice, is this abortion bill in the late months to after birth, from what I'm understanding, in New York and in what other state is
Virginia.
that?
Now, they
Virginia?
haven't passed the one in Virginia. It's just been introduced, but the governor is endorsing it. And he went on a radio station to try and sell it to the Virginia voters.
Right. Okay, so basically what I want to say is what we're discussing is the women's right to choose, correct? To choose whether or not to take a life, period. End of story. You can gussy it up whatever way you want, but it's the choice to take a life. Now, I don't understand how we've gotten to this point with all the birth control out there between the condoms and the pill and the morning after, blah, blah, blah. And the thing that angers me most, Mike, is, they gussy it up in all these different ways. It's tissue, it's not tissue. But what I want to say is people really need to think about is, women that come, that you work with that have had trouble having babies for years and have miscarriage after miscarriage, they mourn that life, correct?
Yes.
You don't say to them, suck it up, buttercup. It's just tissue, correct?
Well, I mean, that's the liberal Democrat, approach. They refuse to recognize that a fetus or even a third trimester kid is human. And this atrocity of a law basically shows it, where they're saying the kid can be killed after birth. I mean, that's infanticide. To my point, that's murder. And why can't a woman, if she decides she's going to have an abortion, have it in those first few weeks? You know, why wait 9 months?
Yes, exactly. And don't get me wrong. I mean, I understand. I have a young daughter. You know, kids are promiscuous. My daughter, hopefully not. But, you know, and there is molestation and rape, and I can understand for those purposes. But please understand, even under that circumstance, you are still deciding the right to choose to take a life or not. And that's all I really wanted to say, Mike.
Well, I'm in agreement with you. That's exactly what goes on here. The liberal Democrats and Planned Parenthood, you know, they're out there just selling this idea that no. It's a bunch of cells, and you know, we can chop it up and sell it, and you shouldn't feel any connection whatsoever with that baby. And here we are, where they're talking. There's actually a law in New York that you can abort a baby right up to the moment of birth, and the one in Virginia. It goes even further than that, saying that, yeah, you can abort it after it's born. And so, anyway, Pam, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. We're going to close the phone lines here because I have some news I need to get into. If you are in the Midwest, you better stay indoors. You better stay warmly dressed. There are at least 12 people dead with this record-breaking low temperatures. They've actually shut down the postal services in the Midwest. They've canceled 2,600 flights. They even found a guy in his garage. I mean, people are literally freezing to death right out there on the streets. Police found a man's body across the street from his home in the Detroit area on Wednesday. He was not wearing a hat or gloves and wasn't dressed for below zero temperatures. A 70-year-old man was also found dead in Detroit in front of a neighbor's home on Wednesday. So heck is definitely freezing over. And apparently a University of Iowa student, Gerald Bells, 18 years old, was found outside an academic building around 3 a.m. Wednesday. He was pronounced dead at the local hospital. It is so cold. How cold is it? Their beer is actually freezing inside the beer delivery trucks. And so for those of you who are thinking about heading down to the pub for a quick one at the end of the day, but apparently kegged beer froze while out for delivery on Tuesday. Temperatures fell as low as minus 26 degrees Fahrenheit with a wind chill of 53 below zero in Minneapolis. So basically brace yourself. They're saying more cold is coming, and it's going to last for a while. It's going to last for a while. So again, stay warm, stay dressed, don't take any chances. Apparently, they set an all-time cold weather record in Aurora, Illinois. And let's see, the maximum, their high for the day was minus 15 degrees Fahrenheit. So here's an article that came out of PJ Media. Record cold forces rethink on global warming. Well, it's about time. And it is rather amazing to see people in the corporate media are still trying to sell this idea that global warming is giving us these record cold winters. Now, that's not what they were saying back in 2000. Back in 2000, they were saying snowfalls are now a thing of the past. We're going to have to describe to our children what it was like to see white all over the ground here. And they're still pushing this thing. But you know, the coldest winter temperatures ever recorded doesn't fit the global warming narrative. And they're still out there pushing that. They want to get you to buy carbon credits. They want a justification for a global environmental authority to tell you how to live your lives. And let's be honest here. Al Gore and all of those people, they got it wrong. The science channels got it wrong. They blew it. When the world started cooling, when the sun started cooling, they should have just quit at that point. but they're greedy. All right, we got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today. We're talking about human-caused global warming and the utter idiocy of the corporate media that are still trying to push this idea that human activity is warming the planet. Now, Donald Trump came out with a tweet in which he basically advised people to stay inside in the Midwest, and then he ended it by saying we could sure use some of that global warming right now. Well, this prompted the corporate media to just go on the warpath, and Esquire said, look at this embarrassing F-word moron. CNN came on out saying, debunking the utter idiocy of Donald Trump's global warming tweet. Forbes came on out saying, here's why the crazy cold temperatures prove global warming is real. The Washington Post came on in, what Trump keeps getting wrong about global warming. And over at NBC News saying, yes, it can be this cold outside in a time of global warming. Now, this is utterly ridiculous. First of all, we know the sun is going into a grand minimum. And there was telescopic images that NASA just released showing the difference between minimum and maximum, and it's really quite significant. But basically, no matter what the weather does, corporate media is going to say, oh, that's caused by global warming. Ooh, we got a tornado. Well, that's global warming for you. We've got snow. Oh, it's global warming for you. Oh, it's a windy day. Well, there's global warming for you. They're just pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. And I think as people deal with this horrendous weather, they're going to realize something is wrong with that whole narrative of human-caused global warming. At least they'd better. Anyway, over at Google, they've shut down their iPhone data gathering app. They're saying it was a mistake, and they apologize. Excuse me. And apparently, over at Facebook, Apple revoked the company's iOS enterprise developer certificates due to the revelations about Facebook bribing teens into supplying the company with reams of personal data, which also took offline all of the employees' apps on their iPhones. So that was a little bit of chaos over there as well. Google has agreed to erase Kurdistan from maps in compliance with the Turkish government. There's an aspect on Google Maps and Google Earth where you can actually add your own maps for personal use or sharing. And apparently Turkey got very upset that somebody had drawn out a map of Kurdistan. They complained. Google has now taken it down. And finally, let's see. HPV vaccine makes it more difficult for women in their late 20s to become pregnant. Ooh, that's going to be fun. And vaccine schedules are completely out of control. In 1950, there were 3 childhood vaccines given when a child entered school. In 2016, the schedule was increased to 74 doses by age 17, with 53 injections and 3 oral doses. Okay, there's the music. It's time for me to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know, email, face-to-face. Forget social media. They're completely, totally useless right now. So please donate to Republic Broadcasting. Donate to What Really Happened. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.